Hey everybody, your old pal Black Swan here, and this week I ran across this video from this guy, and I couldn't think of a more condescending or hypocritical theme for a video, so I thought I would do a response to it, and I'm not actually going to respond to the video itself. I'm going to respond to the theme of the video because I don't think this deserves a response or any more traction. Some of these will be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, some of them will be a little bit more serious. Anyway, so here we go. Here is my top 10 list of myths that Christians believe about Christianity. I know that doesn't work as well as Muslims believe about Islam, but I don't get two different words. I have to use the same word. I have to say Christians and Christianity paired together like an awkward pair of teenagers at their first school dance, whatever. Just fade to credits, okay? Fade to Number 1. The ancient Hebrews were not monotheistic, even though that's what we love to believe. And I'm not talking about the Hebrews that predated the writings of the Bible. I am talking about the societies that generated the myths that exist in the first books of Genesis. They were not monotheistic. They were a version of polytheism called henotheism, which means they didn't have a pantheon like Greco-Roman or Norse gods. There was a group of gods, but their god was the biggest and the baddest. That was how they viewed things. And you can see this in the creation narratives. We've got, in fact, in the first chapters of Genesis, let us create man in our own image. That's not the royal we. That's God talking with other gods about creating man in their image, whatever that was supposed to mean for them back then. Now, one of the places you can really see this, and I'm just going to read this, is in Exodus 6:3. I revealed myself to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, but was not known to them by my name, Yahweh. And this is the distinction here. The Yahweh God and the El God were two separate gods that were merged together over time. And one of the other ways it's been suggested you can see this, the El gods had their heroes, their religious champions all had the El name, like Daniel, Michael. And the Yahweh gods had the Ayah at the end, like Isaiah and Micaiah. So that's one distinction that could possibly be made, but these were definitely two different, actually predating Judaism, predating the Hebrews, mythologies that were blended together. Number 2. Isaiah 53 is not a messianic prophecy. It never was intended to be. Ancient Jews never looked at it as a messianic prophecy. Most modern Jews do not look at it as a messianic prophecy. The suffering servant was Israel itself. All the prophecies in Isaiah were fulfilled around that time. This was not meant, it was never meant to be messianic. This is one of these instances where the New Testament writers were familiar with Old Testament texts, and they were looking for texts they could use to justify the Jesus mythology, the narrative that he was the Messiah, he was the Christ, he was the coming one. And they cherry-picked verses out of the Old Testament that they thought would apply. And these were Greek-speaking writers. They may or may not have actually even been Jews. It's hard to say. They were familiar, obviously, with the Jewish text because this is where they managed to pull these verses from. This was never meant to be that, and it's not. Number 3. This is not the devil. The horns, the forked tail, the red face, all of that, that's iconography that came much, much, much later. A lot of this is drawn from things like Dante's Inferno, the imagery that he created out of that. But the devil is never described like this with the forked goat hooves and all this other stuff. That's just not in the Bible anywhere. And as an addition to that, the snake in the garden was not Satan. It was just a snake, apparently a snake with legs, because its punishment was to crawl on its belly forever. And if it was already crawling on its belly, how could that have been a punishment or a curse? So apparently it was a talking legged snake in the garden. It's never described as the adversary, which is what the word Satan means, is adversary or accuser. It's not set up as this figure opposed to God. It was just a talking snake. And there's overtones of just so stories in here. Why pregnancy is difficult, why getting food from the ground is so hard, why snakes crawl on their bellies, why we have enmity between us and the snake, as the Bible said. It's why people are afraid of snakes and why snakes bite people. There's all little bits of just so stuff woven in on that, but was not Satan. Number 4. And moving on from that a little bit, Adam and Eve were not real. The human race is not descendant from two individuals. That is just factually wrong, just completely wrong. Genetics, the understanding we have of genetics and biology just demonstrates that so deeply and so clearly that there's no reason to hang on to that anymore as like an idea of a fact about reality. If you want to take that as an allegory, as you want to take that as myth, as theological storytelling, that there's some greater theological message involved in the story of Adam and Eve, that's fine. But they are not the progenitors of the human race. It's just not reality. Number 5. And talking about things in the Bible that aren't real. Noah's flood never happened. If you check out Aaron Ra's video series on this, on all the ways that the flood is disproved, like dendrochronology, geology, history, it's just not real. Evolution, genetics, like all of this stuff demonstrates quite clearly that the earth was not covered in an entire layer of water for 40 days and 40 nights, or rain, was covered in the term of 40 days and 40 nights. Like physically, that doesn't work. The forces involved would turn the earth into rubble. It's insane. It's just not real. Number 6. Jesus' birthday is not in December. This is an example of how, as the church was spreading through Europe, they were looking to incorporate people of other faith into the Christian faith, people that we would call pagans now, whether that term is exactly applicable or not, doesn't matter. But they had solstice celebrations, as many people in northern climates do. The winter is dark, the winter is bleak. We're looking for ideas of hope. We're looking for that celebration of rebirth. That's what the winter solstice is about. And when they wanted to incorporate these people into their religious beliefs, one of the easiest ways to do that is to find celebrations that they already have, high holy days that they already have, and incorporate those and just say, no, this is Jesus' birthday now. But even if Jesus existed, and I'm willing to grant that there probably was an itinerant messianic preacher around that time named Yeshua, because none of that is particularly spectacular or extraordinary as a claim. Even if he did exist, even according to the Bible, with the chronologies in the Bible, it was not in December. It couldn't have been. So, no, Jesus was not born in December. Number 7. The concept of the Trinity is not clearly spelled out anywhere in the Bible. This is an example of what happens when you have people that are taking different theological ideas, different mythologies, and trying to blend them together and to make them into a cohesive whole. And you run into these really contradictory ideas, and you're trying desperately to cling to a central point. And in this case, it's monotheism, because the Jews were monotheistic by the time Christ came along and around the turn of the millennium. So that monotheism was very important to them, and they were trying to harmonize this. And you can see the development of what's called the high Christology as Jesus moves from a teacher or a preacher through an anointed one, the Christ, to almost like a demigod status, to the very being part of the Godhead itself, as the book of John tends to spell out. And they were trying to harmonize all these different ideas from centuries, millennia in the past, from different cultures, and blending it all together. And you end up with this, frankly, bizarre concept of the Trinity, that God is both three things and one thing all at the same time. And it's frankly nonsensical. And the reason people have a hard time explaining it and understanding it is because it's really convoluted, and it's trying to put things together that don't fit together. So, and as a matter of fact, the justification for the Holy Spirit being part of the Trinity is even less than what's in the about Jesus being part of the Trinity. does not make a whole lot of sense. So, Trinity, not really in the Bible. It was a theology that was developed much later to try and make the pieces fit together. Number 8. This is sort of a twofold one, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's a bit of a twofer. The Jews did not build the pyramids. The Bible never says that they built the pyramids. It says that they were forced to work with bricks and mortar and in the fields. It does not specifically use the word pyramid or describe a building like a pyramid anywhere in the Exodus account. That's just not in there. And speaking of that, the Exodus never happened. It is at best a legendary enhancement of a much, much, much smaller event. But based on what we know about archaeology, about ancient Egypt, which is deep and thorough, there were never a large mass of Hebrews living in Egypt at any time, certainly not around that time period. There might have been very, very small groups of people, like extended family size people, that may have been driven out or whatever, and the legends grew from there. Or the legends may have grown up around the acrimony between Israel and Egypt over the years. But the Exodus just didn't happen. It's just another thing in the Bible that clearly didn't happen. And clinging to that, you can only do that for theological grounds, not rational, factual grounds. Number 9. This one is a little bit more interdenominational. And it caught me off guard when I was a Protestant Christian. And I heard this. The Immaculate Conception was not Jesus, which always confused me because Jesus was supposedly born without sin, so he could be the salvation for us, the perfect sacrifice to atone for our sins, so he had to be without sin, which is why he didn't have a biological father, because apparently the sin was passed through the biological father. So I always thought that Jesus was the Immaculate Conception, but no, that was Mary, because apparently Jesus needed a perfect sinless vessel to be matured in, to be grown in. And Mary was born without sin, but I don't know how Mary could be born without sin if she had a physical father, but maybe she sinned after. It's all very confusing. But if she sinned after, then she would not have been immaculate anymore. So maybe she was sinless until Jesus came along, but then why didn't she spend the rest of her life being sinless? It's really a confusing idea. But like I said, that's more interdenominational. Number 10. This is not Jesus, or this, or this, or this, or this. Jesus was not white. He was a first century Palestinian man. He was brown-skinned, probably like a medium brown skin. He probably looked more like this. I'm sure many of you have seen this picture before. The reason we see so many portrayals of Jesus being white and all super pretty with the neat little beard is because Europeans dominated the production of art through the Renaissance, and everybody painted everybody that looked like them. So when they painted images of Jesus, they painted white guys. And when they painted Mary, they painted this alabaster white woman. These were not white people. The imagery has been co-opted, so always should keep that in mind. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I hope this is taken in the spirit. It was meant like a little bit of a jest and a little bit of a poke at the insanity that was that other video that I started this with. If you liked it, thumbs up. If you don't like it, thumbs down, whatever. And as always, be kind to one another. Peace out.